President Trump would be the first president to be impeached twice. But what might Republican lawmakers do, especially here in Louisiana? Asha Staples has more.
3 days later, and images of Trump supporters rushing the Capitol building continue to circulate like wildfire.
I was just shocked. It was unbelievable. It was depressing. It was shameful. I was speechless.
Since Wednesday, President Trump has come under strong criticism, sparking conversations of the 25th Amendment and forcing the president from office during his final days in power. As a failsafe, the president could block that move, and then it would take a 2/3 vote of Congress to remove him. Associate Professor of Political Science at Loyola University, Dr. Sean Kane says that's not likely to happen, but impeachment is.
I think the culmination of an impeachment, the removal of a president, is very unlikely. There's limited time. But the first step, the impeachment itself, I think is likely. I think the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats are going to support this, because I think they believe it's the strongest statement they can make against President Trump.
The possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment and impeaching stems from the attempt to interrupt the confirmation voting of the Electoral College results. Louisiana's congressmen were not all in agreement to confirm or reject the election results, but they were in agreement on condemning the violence they witnessed on Capitol Hill.
I think all of us need to condemn this in the strongest terms.
5 of Louisiana's congressmen voted to overturn election results in at least one state. Congressman Graves voted to overturn Pennsylvania's results, but he says now it's time to move forward peacefully.
Is the system perfect? No. Do we need to work to perfect it and eliminate voter fraud? Absolutely. But this is the decision that our process yielded, and we've got to respect it and move forward.
Senator John Kennedy objected to the election certification. He said Thursday, our goal is to ensure full confidence and transparency in our elections is a noble one, and I'll keep pursuing it. Some now questioning what the future will look like for Republican lawmakers from Louisiana who side with Trump.
What happened on Wednesday will be something that will be a political issue going forward. It may not be enough to harm anybody's political re-election goals, but their ambitions for higher office may be limited.
Asha Staples, Eyewitness News.
The only Louisiana lawmaker who did not vote to overturn election results was Senator Bill Cassidy. He has also not reacted publicly to impeachment plans.